sit there, and this is why we do what we do as coaches, to watch them fight, their competitive spirit, their toughness. These are things that we talk about all the time, but we also talk about walking the walk. It's easy to talk it. It's another thing to walk it. And when you play a team like that, you better be able to walk it. And we knew when we came out in the second half, I knew they were going to come out. They went in and had a halftime just like we did, and great teams make adjustments. And, I wasn't going to sit there and look at it too long. We used a timeout pretty quick, but I thought our kids responded after that. We didn't have just a great third quarter, but it wasn't as bad as it started out. And so I just there's not enough words or time for me to express how proud I am of these kids. Their incredible competitive spirit today.
And they certainly walk the walk and talk the talk at Moody Center, the UT women, beating South Carolina, previously ranked number 2 in the country, 66-62. And that's where we'll start this episode of the Horns Report. I'm your host, Billy Gates, and thank you so much for watching. With me to talk about, as usual, talk about everything, is sports director Roger Wallace. And Roger, we both watched that game. It kind of seemed like Texas had the lead the entire game, but it also felt like they were going to lose that game late, but they were able to close it out.
Yeah, and I think that's the respect to Dawn Staley's program, is it's a lot of times not if but when, but I think that's one of the more impressive parts of a lot of impressive things this Texas team did, is the fact that they never let South Carolina get the lead and kind of get that confidence. And they did it in different ways. It wasn't a pretty offensive game. You only scored 66, but they grinded it out. They played really good defense. They did a lot of things that when they struggled, they didn't do so well on the glass. Kyla Oldacre and Taylor Jones, it was almost like first half, second half players, although Oldacre had a nice finish to the first half, but Taylor Jones had the really good start for Texas. And then they just kept making the play they had to make to hold on to that lead. Never got too big. They got to 10, but they never, in the second half, never really extended that lead. And then Rory Harmon hit those 2 big free throws to get it off a one-possession game, and they flip-flopped spots in the poll, so Texas now number 3 heading into this week.
And with any Vic Schaefer team, they're going to hang their hat on defense first. Like that's the main focus. And when you hold a team like South Carolina to 37% shooting from that is a remarkable number in and of itself, considering how good they have been offensively the past, 4, 5, 6 seasons.
Yeah, and I think at 2 possessions down the stretch that kind of illustrated that. That's one of them. Good timing.
Yeah.
Shea Holly with the block shot. And they ended up getting South Carolina still got the possession down by 4, but couldn't convert. And then Jordan Lee had a stop down by 2 later in the ball game, forced a shot over the backboard that Madison Booker got the rebound. But to me, those were, it's not always that presence inside. It can be on the ball. Defense, and Shea Holly is one of the best Texas has. Jordan Lee, I know that made Vic Schaefer smile because we think more of her, that kind of that instant offense down the stretch. But for them to win in that fashion has to really give them a lot of confidence. And that confidence may only last a few days because, as we know, they got to turn around and go to Lexington this week against another ranked opponent.
Yeah. Here's the schedule for them coming up. They beat Vanderbilt on the 6th, 87-66. Used the three-point shot to beat the Commodores, kind of a different way that we've seen them win this season. And then on Sunday, what we've been talking about, 66-62 over South Carolina. And then Thursday, at number 8 Kentucky, always a tough place to play, no matter what. You could be playing cornhole or tiddlywinks there, and it'd be tough to play there. And then on Sunday, you never get a day off in the SEC, hosting number 5 LSU, 2 p.m. That game's going to be on ABC, so that's a big national game. It's always great when the women's game is on a national broadcast. Just the exposure that this sport keeps getting ever since, Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, that kind of crew sort of put women's basketball back on the national radar.
Well, yeah, and Texas has got a great story to tell. Madison Booker, she's kind of the third of the big 3 now sophomores, but I think that's partially because her game isn't quite as flashy as Hannah Hidalgo and Juju Watkins out at USC, but her efficiency Some of the things that she does, they don't do. Another double-figure rebounding game. She's big. She's strong. She can play the point as well as play off the point. But, yeah, in that LSU game, Billy, if they somehow manage to get through this 4-game gauntlet undefeated, great chance they're going to have a chance to share the title with South Carolina, because if they beat LSU, that gives them that second loss. So to me, that's one thing that maybe got a little lost in yesterday's win.
Sure, yeah.
Oh, by the way, they're tied for first in the SEC. They were picked second, so this is no big surprise. But what a way to join the conference if they could manage to get at least a piece of that regular season title before they go to the conference tournament. But yeah, and then there's the seeding, and I think they've set themselves up for one. Maybe they drop to a 2, but that's really not that significant as a 3 or a 4, just because of how you're scheduled in the tournament.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say next, is that like this kind of win is a win that kind of gets the committee thinking, hey, like this is a top 4 team in the country. We better put them number 1 in a regional once we get to tournament time. But that's a little bit off. There's still 5 more games left of the regular season, plus the conference tournament. So we've got a little bit to figure that out. Some quick numbers from the women's game. Madison Booker, as we said, 20 points, 11 rebounds. I believe that's her 7th or 8th double-double of the season. Just a tremendous talent. She's so good.
And she admitted that, again, she didn't shoot it that well.
No, 7 of 22.
7 of 22, but she made some big buckets down the stretch and then contributed on the glass, and they all played defense. Yeah,
Kyla Oldacre, 13 and 6 off the bench. She's been really good, giving Taylor Jones kind of spells underneath. And then Jones ends up with 11 points and 6 boards. We mentioned the AP poll earlier. Here are the top 10 on the women's side. UCLA remains number 1. Notre Dame jumps to number 2, with Texas sliding up to 3, and then South Carolina dropping back to 4, LSU 5, Southern Cal 6, UConn 7, Kentucky 8, Ohio State 9, NC State at 10. That is 2 top 10 teams coming up for the women's team. The SEC is insane. Like, this is just bonkers.
Yeah, same as the men's. Now you got 1-2 on the men's AP poll. But Texas and Vic Schaefer's clubs, they do this. They get better as the season goes along. You just hope for Texas's sake that it's just not one of those beat down schedules, and then you have a little lapse in the tournament and all comes crashing down. But so far they've been really good at kind of staying with it. And again, if they get through this next stretch here this week, you probably have to lock them up as a number 1 seed unless the wheels just fall off, because that would be 4 consecutive ranked wins, including 2 top 10 teams or 3 top 10 teams. And then obviously they got to finish it out. Right. Little tease there to the football team losing their only Texas X on that coaching staff.
I got to hit the buttons in the right order for this thing to work. So we'll wrap up women's basketball there. Move on to football. I know it's the off season, but there's always football news happening. Like what you just saw, that was former Texas Longhorn safety coach Blake Gideon, another former Longhorn in his playing days as well. He is headed to Georgia Tech to take over the defensive coordinator job. That hire announced last week, but now we're just getting around to it on this Horns report. But Roger, that kind of comes with no surprise. I mean, obviously, if you have a successful team, your coaches are going to be approached by other programs to try to give them promotions, try to lure them away. Obviously, that safeties room and that secondary for Texas was pretty darn good this season.
Yeah, they were outstanding, and you're happy for Blake Gideon, a kid that grew up right here in Leander, and he played 4-year starter at Texas, and he's been on one of those coaching odysseys, had a lot of stops along the way, including a stint in Atlanta at Georgia State. Yeah. So great for him that he gets that next spot, and he's got a head coach written on him. You look at his lineage with his dad. Steve, an outstanding high school coach, not only for him at Leander, but around the state of Texas. So this is that next step, and Sark can only be happy when guys move on and get that dream continued as they move up. And I'm sure he was thrilled to Sark choice, either chose to stay, or Cowboys chose to go in a different direction. You love the continuity, but you also love guys seeing their careers advance. I mean, Sark was there, so he understands what it's like to move up the ranks.
Yeah, and that was one thing that Sark said in a statement through Georgia Tech. It's kind of weird how that kind of worked out. Georgia Tech writes this long press release announcing Gideon as their defensive coordinator, and then at the bottom of it, they have like all of these sort of statements from random folks about how good Blake Gideon is. One of them was from Sark, and he was very, very happy for Blake. Said that he'd been working to be a DC for a long time, ever since he got onto Sark's staff there in 2021. And Sark was very, very gracious in losing one of his top assistants, not only one of his top on-field assistants, but a great recruiter as well. So you're kind of losing two things when Gideon takes off for Atlanta.
Yeah, he's a no-nonsense guy. He was as a player, and he has been as a coach. And I'm sure he's the kind of guy that other coaches love because of their work ethic and just what they put into that job. And for him, he's played at the highest level in college. He's experienced the highs. He's experienced the lows. Obviously, every Longhorn fan knows what I'm talking about with the Texas Tech ball game in 2008. But he has built himself a great future. And like I said, little doubt that he'll get his chance at some point to be a head coach. And now I'm sure Sark had a list in his back pocket. The old DeLost odds line, you always have a list ready because you never know when you're going to lose somebody.
Yeah.
Texas rarely loses head coaches to other jobs, but sometimes you just have to make changes. Yeah. So anyway, I'm sure Sark will be ready to roll with what he thinks is the best candidate here, probably in the next week or two.
Oh yeah. Definitely, probably not gonna take a lot of time to replace him and get somebody in there. Staying with some Longhorn news. A stat that just completely blew my mind, Roger. We're talking about yesterday's Super Bowl between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. Xavier Worthy scores a touchdown in the third quarter for Kansas City. That was the first time in Super Bowl history that a Texas Longhorn has scored a touchdown in the big game. That blew me away.
Well, they've had some really good running backs that just didn't get into a position. When you think of the Kansas City Chiefs and Priest Holmes and Jamal Charles, you think of Ricky Williams, obviously.
Yeah.
VY never got past, I believe, the first round as a quarterback, and you can go down the line. Roy Williams, wide receiver with the Lions and the Cowboys. So I just kind of one of those gee whiz stats. But hey, Devontae Smith is the first Alabama player drafted out of Alabama that scored a touchdown. So I think that would shock a lot of people. Jalen Hurts was not drafted out of Alabama. He was drafted out of Oklahoma. So, yeah, just kind of a gee whiz stat. And Worthy, he took advantage. He got two yesterday.
Yeah, he grabbed that second one in pretty much garbage time, a 50-yard pass from Pat Mahomes, who, gosh, as good as he's been, especially in the playoffs, yesterday was not Mr. Mahomes' best night. But I guess sometimes that happens. But
tough for the folks in the Kansas City area.
Yeah,
and Lubbock. that's their adopted team. So
Worthy ends the Super Bowl with 8 catches, 157 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So he was the bright spot for Kansas City in an otherwise pretty awful showing.
Yeah, not much of it early though.
No.
That was the problem for the Chiefs. Nobody had any numbers early in that ball game.
No, Philly wins that one 40-22. So moving on to the men's side of basketball here at UT, just a rough week for the men's team. Lose to 2 unranked teams. One of them at home. You lose to Arkansas 78-70 at home. And then, as Rodney Terry said after the Vanderbilt loss, 86-78 there in Nashville, you have to be the aggressor in the SEC or else you're going to get run over. And he said that they just couldn't match Vanderbilt's physicality, which it could be an issue going forward if they're going to seriously try to make a run at a potential NCAA tournament bid.
Well, I mean, the way this roster has been constructed, that's the first thing that jumps out at you is what are they going to do against really aggressive teams on the board? I mean, Caden Shedrick and Zarek Onyema rarely are on the court together. Those are their 2 true bigs.
Yeah.
As Rodney Terry told me early in the season, though, it's not about traditional bigs. It's about that 6'4" to 6'7" guy that can do everything. And Texas, Arthur Kaluma's probably pound for pound their best rebounder. But yeah, they got bullied on the boards. But they survived. They survived a couple of runs and got hit in the face and then hit back. But then down the stretch, when one team needed to separate. Vanderbilt did, and Jalen Curry, their big guy, had a career day, and he was owning the offensive glass. And now they come home on Tuesday to take on the top scoring team in the nation, who is still number 2. Auburn held on to number 1 despite the loss to Florida. And then Saturday, that Kentucky team comes in, and that's all about slowing down that Mark Pope offense.
Yeah, and it's like the women's side. It's like all basketball in college this season. The SEC, it's like the Eastern Conference in the NBA almost. Like it's just a gauntlet.
Yeah, and I think they've got to find 3 more conference wins just to be on the bubble. I think 8 makes you pretty safe in the SEC. 7, and again, we've talked about this, Billy, their non-conference didn't do many favors because they don't really have a marquee win on the schedule. So therefore, it's all coming from do in the SEC. Yeah, obviously, tomorrow night could go a long way if they could knock off number 2.
Their best non-conference win looks like it's NC State, and they're a net rating in the hundreds. So, that's not going to do you any favors. Looking at a couple games after Kentucky, though, you look in the future. There's South Carolina, who hasn't won an SEC game yet. They get Arkansas again in Fayetteville. That's always a tough place to play. And they get Georgia. So 2 of the 3 teams that they're going to play, not all that good when it comes to SEC play. So we'll see if they're able to get anything done there. But they've got to get something done, or else the NIT is going to be calling. Maybe.
Yeah, I think you have to get a split this weekend.
Yeah.
If you don't, then you're looking at being 6 games under 500.
Yeah, they're 4-7 right now.
So 5 games under 500 in league play. The national narrative will, be another part of it, and you just got to get one of these ranked teams. You got to get another win, and then Fayetteville's gonna be tough. Yeah. So then you put it all on Georgia and South Carolina. Not going to give you any boost. No. It's just going to be SEC wins. Right. So I think you need another ranked win here, unless they're going to win in Fayetteville to have a legitimate chance to get in the tournament.
Got to find something, and I just have a sneaky suspicion that March 8th season finale in Moody Center against the old rival Sooners might have implications of them being on a bubble going one way or the other. So we'll see.
They will have Tremont Mark back. Yeah. Rodney Terry spoke today. They expect him back for the Alabama game.
That will certainly help. Spring sports just now getting going. The softball team started their season with just a weird road trip. They played doubleheaders Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 3 different places, but as the top-ranked teams should do in the preseason, they won them all. They're 6-0, coming back home to play in the Bevo Classic. They've got Maryland, and they got old friend Texas Tech coming to town. And like we were talking off air earlier, Roger, Texas Tech went out and spent a little cash to get the most prized possession in the transfer portal when it comes to softball over the offseason.
Yeah, and Najir Kennedy, they saw her in the World Series from Stanford. And no secret that they spent a bunch of money to get her, and we'll see how big of a difference that makes for Texas Tech. But Texas did beat her in Oklahoma City. Remember, that was a weird play on that running play.
Why is every diamond sport against Stanford? Why does it always end weird when Texas
kidding.
And Stanford play?
Yeah, they get them. They get Maryland on Friday, the first game, and then Tech, but. 6 games in 3 different cities.
Weird.
Capping it off with wins over Tulsa and Sam Houston State on Sunday, and now they get to come home, and hopefully it'll be a nice weekend, and I'm sure they'll have huge crowds. No baseball in town. They'll be in Arlington Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and they'll get an old Big 12 rival on Sunday when they play Oklahoma State to close out things at Globe Life.
Yep, and that was the next mention was the baseball team. They start their season Friday at Globe Life at the Shriners Children's College Showdown against Louisville. So that'll be their season opener on Friday, and then they have Ole Miss, and then Ole Miss in a non-conference game because they're going to be playing in the same conference this season, and then Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's really good. That Nolan Schubert, he is a ball player.
Yeah, he's a monster at the plate.
Alrighty, well, that will do it for this episode of the Horns Report. Thank you so much for watching. For Roger Wallace, I'm Billy Gates, and we'll talk to you again very soon.